Welcome to Bell Brothers Brewing. This is Engineers talking about beers.
Today we're going to talk about a coffee Baltic Porter from Crooked Stave. Today we're talking about Crooked Stave's Baltic Porter aged with Ethiopian coffee. Now it's interesting in that sense is that it talked about, rather than like using cold brew in the beer, it says aged with. And based on the
wording,
the wording, it seems like it was probably like coffee beans were added in the fermentation, or maybe it was aged after the fermentation, which would be really interesting.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting way to add coffee. Age it on the coffee beans and see. Or maybe coffee grounds. I don't know. If anybody does know, we would love to know.
Right. So it says sweet bloom, and we were just looking up some stuff about blooming coffee. Right? So there's a sweet bloom. Coffee roasters, single origin, and it's Ethiopian coffee, which Starbucks actually, right? Starbucks is using some Ethiopian coffee right now, so there must be some flavors out of that, some hope from those pieces. Crooked Stave's out of Denver, Colorado, so not exactly local-ish.
It's local enough. I mean, it's an hour.
Right.
We're on the north end of Colorado Springs. It's not that far.
Right. So it's reasonably close. I'm looking forward to this aspect of it. It's another interesting fact. Porters, right, traditionally don't have like that burn characteristic, or they're not supposed to be quite as bitter or roasty.
Quite as roasty as a stout.
Roasty as a stout, because a stout, right, is like a stout porter or a robust porter. And so porters are supposed to be a little more refined, a little less, a little sweeter, maybe a little less of that like intense.
They're that weird. They're a middle ground between a stout and a dark brown ale or something. There's everything in between there.
And so by adding coffee to it, you kind of naturally have to
push it into that stout category a little.
Right. I think it may verge into that stout category, give it some of that roast character.
One thing that I'm seeing is, since it's a Baltic porter, which means you usually have a bit more of those fruity sort of, a bit of acidity from the Baltic porter side. And it's an Ethiopian coffee, which I just had this morning. Not the coffee that's in this, but I had Starbucks Ethiopian coffee for breakfast this morning. And it has a more fruity, acidic sort of nature. So what they might be looking for is to highlight the fruity acidity of the Ethiopian coffee, if it's the same sort of coffee as the one I had, with the Baltic Porter. So it might actually be just enhancing that fruity acidity, a little bit of the roast, because you got, it's coffee. It's only
right.
Can only make it so not roasty in a porter. So a little roast is fine. So I think they might be trying to focus on that fruity acidity of both sides.
I'd be really interested to see, because typically the Baltic porters have got more of those dark fruit like fig or prune, raisin kind of flavors. They tend to be sweeter in that sense. That's a good point, that you get this like really fruity aspect. And so if the Ethiopian coffee is supposed to enhance that, that should be really interesting.
Well, let's find out.
Right, so hopefully our pour worked out the way it was supposed to be, and I'm able to edit this in somewhere, or it's in this like top left hand or center corner or something. Check out this pour.
And we know it's not a classic beer pour, but it was for the shot. It's to make it look good.
If you like it, let us know down below. If you don't like it, tough, but you can also tell us down below. Direct contact. As you can see, so while Cody's smelling it, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on here, preferably without the glass being in my face. That's for you, wife. We actually were holding it up to the light. We've got stage lights going on over here, hopefully to help out a little bit for what you're seeing. And I couldn't see any light coming through. This thing is dark. I mean, hella dark, crazy dark, super. And then you got this like tan head to it. Good lacing going on around the glass itself. You can't see too much of that. Maybe you can get a little close up on that aspect of it, right? But there's some lacing going on in there. Not as much actually as our last video, as we saw in the cherry, not the cherry, strawberry chocolate milkshake IPA. So a little less than that, but not surprising because this kind of style should have like more alcohol, which cuts down on that. It is pretty strong.
It says 8%. Yeah,
oh, okay.
8% by volume on here, so it's a pretty strong beer.
Pretty hefty on that, but I like the tan coloring on that. It looked really good. We got a little bit on that pour that you said kind of looked like that nitro bubble, kind of Guinness style.
I mean, just looking at this looks somewhat like a Guinness. You know, you got that pitch black with the tan head. You know, decent lacing. It does look Guinness-like in the cup. It smells. You can smell the roast. Not getting much acidity. Mostly just smelling roastiness.
Yeah, it is really roasty. Some might consider that a little bit like dark chocolate-ish. I wouldn't say necessarily chocolate, but good roast. Maybe slightly burnt, slightly, in the sense that you kind of get some of the acidity that potentially comes from the coffee.
I think we're also getting a little bit of alcohol notes. I'm smelling a...
Oh, like a fusel alcohol at 8%, or
maybe not fusel, just that aged alcohol sort of smell.
Oh, okay. It was aged.
Yeah, it was aged, so I think you're getting a little aged alcohol sort of smell. It's almost like vanilla, but it's not vanilla.
Well, because it doesn't say barrel aged, right?
Yeah, it's not barrel aged, so it's not that. But there's it's almost vanilla-like, but it's not vanilla, and that's usually that stronger alcohol sort of interacting with everything else that's in the beer.
It is very pleasing, though. I will say that from an aromatic aspect of it, looking at it, smelling it, it invites
nice.
Drink it. It's a very enjoyable smell. Some beers, I've had a couple of beers where you say, oh man, this smells like foot. That's not a great beer to get into personally.
Just smell. You can smell it. You're like, this is gonna be a bitter one. Before you even stick it in your mouth, you're like, ooh. Get prepared.
Gotta prep for your beer. No, this actually looks looks very inviting. I like this. So Crooked Stave, congratulations. Fantastic job. I'd say very inviting beer. Let's see what it tastes like. Like the Baltic porters, you're supposed to have a little bit more of those dark fruit flavors. Hopefully the Ethiopian coffee can play into that. Based on the aroma, it should have some more of that roast, maybe a little bit of the burnt, possibly acidity kind of aspect to it. I'm hoping that comes through. Should be really fun, personally. What do we got?
Definitely roasty. You can taste that roasted coffee flavor. It's very smooth though. It's not harsh. You don't get this it's not drying. It's not too dry. It's a nice, smooth sort of feeling. You can get some acidity. It's not a lot. Not quite getting the fruity flavors as much. There's a little bit. It's definitely there, but you're definitely tasting the roasty. The coffee comes through well, and it's smooth. It's a hint sweet, or at least it comes off a hint sweet. It may not actually have any sugar in it, but it has a sweet impression.
Right. I agree with you. I think it's actually really well balanced with the bitterness that could come from a coffee. The coffee itself is really well balanced with the semi-sweet Baltic porter. I think Baltic maybe is a bit of a stretch in this case because I'm not picking up as much of that dark fruit character that I would expect. Like dark, sweet, roast, so maybe chocolate, burn, coffee kind of flavors to it. But honestly, I'm not picking up like a plum or fig or dates. I mean, where you would normally get those really rich dark chocolate or dark fruit
flavors,
which are typical of, I think, a Baltic porter.
I would honestly go sweet stout. This makes me think of a good coffee sweet stout. You know, there's a hint of sweetness. It's got the right body. It's got the coffee roasty flavors, but they're not too strong. So, I mean, if you went, you know, a sweet stout could be more roasty.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is a good, you could almost say this is a sweet stout. In terms of it's sweet, it's roasty, you got the coffee flavors. It's got the right body.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a nice, thick, creamy body.
It is.
So maybe just change the name at the end and just call it coffee sweet stout.
Coffee sweet stout. I think for a sweet stout, it's just on the low end of a sweet stout. Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. I agree with that definition. I think it fits much better into a sweet stout category because of the flavors going on and the creaminess that's involved in the flavor itself. But it's not quite sweet enough. If you've tasted like Left Hand Sweet Stout or Left Hand Milk Stout, it's just over the top, crazy sweet, crazy creamy, and that's, I would say, like that's the high end of what a sweet stout could be. Because too much more than that, it's like candy, right? It's like syrup coming out of there.
So you could call this like a restrained sweet stout. You know?
It's
gently sweet. It's not huge. You know, it doesn't feel really, really thick. You know, it's got body. It's got a fair amount of body, but it's not thick.
Right.
And it's not too sweet. The flavors aren't crazy. You know, it's like, it's very good and it's very balanced. You know, this is one that you could actually do, you know, pints back to back.
Oh yeah.
Because none of the flavors are too strong, but they're all in the right balance that you really want to just keep sipping it.
So what do you think about the coffee flavor coming through? So separate, you know, the stout or the sweet stout or you'll call it Baltic Porter, right? But I think sweet stout's an epic call. Let's pull that part of the beer out of it, right? Let's just talk about the Ethiopian coffee aspect of what's going on. I don't pick up what I would consider that punch of a coffee, right? Like there's certain coffee stouts. Well, we'll take those as an example, right? Where it's like coffee grounds, whoop-ah, you know.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, you don't have, you know, sometimes when you get that coffee stout, whoop-ah, you're just like, ugh, this tastes like somebody took the grounds out of their sink and threw them in my beer.
Right, yeah.
This has coffee flavor, but it is very restrained. You're not getting that like whoop-ah of coffee flavor. You can tell they used coffee. There's a little bit of roastiness. There's a hint of those coffee flavors in there. But it's definitely not the star of the show. I think they really wanted to balance the coffee and the beer. They wanted both sides to be important here.
And I thought with that, it doesn't have the coffee grounds bitterness. Like there's the acidity that we were talking about from an Ethiopian coffee, where there's a little bit of a, you know, kind of tingle or a brightness. Yeah, brightness is a much better term. Brightness on the palate from the coffee, but you don't get that coffee ground bitter, overindulgent. Like it's just where it's like, oh man, yep, there's coffee in this beer. I got you, right?
Yeah, I hear you. It's definitely, I think that's right, and that's, you know, a more refined coffee flavor, I think is what you could call it. You know, it's the brightness, some of the roastiness of the coffee, but it's not just a big heavy hit of where the coffee is carrying all the flavor and you kind of lose your beer in it. This is refined coffee flavor balancing with beer.
I agree. It's well balanced. So as far as flavor, excellent. I think it's very unique. We disagree in the sense of I think it should be a sweet stout, not a Baltic Porter. Because of what's going on. Maybe there was a baseline somewhere in there.
I like the mouthfeel. It's actually one of the high points, I would say, is it's got a nice sort of smooth and creamy mouthfeel. If you added lactose to this, maybe you could go into a latte stout.
A milk stout. And that would mix well with the sweet.
Yeah, and that would mix well with the sweetness. You bring up the sweetness a little more. You might have to add a little more coffee to keep the coffee flavor in it. But it's sweet, it's creamy, and so I think, yeah, I like it a lot. And the feel on the mouthfeel is just really good.
It's not super heavy, which is kind of cool. Because sometimes like dark stouts or porters, especially with a lot of the flavors in there, can get really heavy. Where you drink one glass and you're like, oh, there's no more. I can't take any more of this. Right? It's just like you're chewing your beer. Which in certain circumstances, I love chewing my beer. So don't take that wrong. Right? I think in this case, it's a very solid medium. You know, where it's not like super over the top full. You get this creamy richness. It's enjoyable to sit and drink, but you could drink more, right? I would say that based on what it had to say, because it says Baltic Porter, I have to grade it less than what I typically would. This is a phenomenal beer.
It is very enjoyable.
So if I had taste, aroma, appearance, all the rest of it separate from what was going on, I would say this is like a 9. Right?
It's very enjoyable.
Fantastic beer.
One of the most enjoyable coffee beers I've had because you get a really refined coffee flavor. I think that's the big thing. Is it's not a big punch. You're not getting coffee grounds. You're getting the refined acidity of a well-made cup of coffee.
I agree completely. It is a fantastic. So separate from that, it's a 9. But because they listed it as a Baltic Porter, which it is not.
Nope.
I would say then it's like a 6.
Yeah.
5. Like it's still a good beer.
6. It's a good beer. It's miscategorized. I'd say a 6.
Yeah.
6 to 7 is
6,
kind of a fair assessment.
Right.
You made a good beer. You get categorized it wrong.
Well, if this was in a beer judging competition, right,
Yeah.
you would put on there, wrong category, we apologize. We'd either try to move it to another category, or if it didn't have the category, you'd be like, sorry, this is not the right place for it. You're going to get a lot of points, but you're going to get dinged pretty heavily because it's not right to style. Tube style, not okay.
But that's just how it goes. That's,
right.
In terms of just enjoyability, very good. And that's the most important metric when you're talking about selling beer to people is, does it taste good?
Yes.
The answer is yes, it tastes good.
I think
you should go get some.
I think a lot of our own beers also fall into some of those categories, right? Where it doesn't necessarily fall into
You can't categorize it perfectly.
Right, a traditional beer. But then people are like, wow, that's really good. And you're like, yeah, it is. And they're like, well, what is it? And you're like, yeah, it's kind of like this, and it's kind of like that, and it's kind of like Crooked Stave. I can't fault you for brewing something like this, or in the sense of like trying to say, I think Baltic Porter for the
For someone who doesn't know exactly what a Baltic Porter should be,
right,
you would never know the difference. Because good luck defining a porter 90% of the time anyway. Style that existed prior to stouts, because you had a stout porter that became stouts, and then stouts kind of became the thing, and porter became a catch-all
for anything else.
For anything that wasn't a stout and wasn't a brown ale or anything in that range.
By the way, your brown ales have also got English browns and American browns, and there are big differences there. And even dark browns of those, they are not porters. Do not list them as porters, nor are they stouts.
And then we could bring in German beers where you got your Dunkels, and your Dunkelweiss.
Doppelbocks, right? Because Doppelbocks in some cases
your
you get something
Doppelbock
like
would look almost like this, or a dark strong when you go to Belgians.
Right, so there's all sorts of styles. I'm not faulting Crooked Stave for trying to maybe, we'll say, publicize to the mass in the sense of like a sweet stout aspect of it, or trying to play down some of the bitterness that is typically involved with, like when you say stout,
people think
bitter, right? Yeah. Overall, too much, too enhanced. That the volume knob is turned to 11, right? And in this case, like we've talked about, it's very well balanced.
It's refined.
Yes, and so maybe Baltic Porter for the commercial aspect was a better call. I would say as a judge, shame on you. As a drinker,
very good.
Fucking awesome.
It's delicious. This has been Bell Brothers Brewing. Engineers talking about beers.
Cheers. There's the other wife. Because I say the wife, and Liz gets a kick out of that. She's like, we're the Bell Brothers, and there's the wife, right? And she thinks, yes, I am the wife, but not of both brothers, right? There's a second wife, but that wife doesn't drink beer, and so she doesn't get to participate, or doesn't want to participate in a lot of what we're doing here. One day, maybe.
There's no weird reverse Utah shit going on here.
Right, you gotta look at the camera. Yeah, and I kept so some of the other videos, right? You can see me like looking, and then I'll be like down in the corner, then up, then down in the corner, and up, and I'm like, fucking hey, why do I keep doing that? Because it's like you're talking so as a maybe we'll do this post credit kind of deal, blooper kind of aspect. Let me explain this to you, right? So we're sitting in his living room. And we're talking to a camera. And I never realized how difficult it is to talk to a camera like you're talking to somebody at YouTube or on the other side, because It's camera. So I'm just having a conversation with my brother, a little bit of hustle on that. So it is rather interesting to sit and talk to you and talk to the camera and the YouTube community.
Facebook.
It's completely different, right? This is a whole skill set that we didn't really hone.
Nope.
At all. Neither one of us was in drama club.
I don't even know if drama club would help you with this. I feel like streaming / YouTubing is a whole other thing that nobody.
Right.
There needs to be classes for it, and there probably are on like Skillshare or something. You know, unintentional plug here.
Right.
Skillshare might have a class on this. We should probably look it up.
We should take more classes on that, but we don't.
But we don't.
We're here
Because I like beer more than I like classes.
We're gonna spend the time figuring out business and beer and opening up the brewery rather than dealing with YouTube channels.
Ooh, kitty. What's up, kitty? We got a niblet.
Goodbye. Look at new kitty. Ah,
new kitty. He doesn't like being held that way. He likes to be held across the shoulder.
He's going down.
That's the niblets. Anyway, good luck defining a porter to anybody, because I mean, it's